The Jets will soon hire a new general manager and a new head coach. But this week, we got a reminder no matter whom they hire, nothing will change until ownership grows up and starts behaving itself in a professional manner. Let's talk about it today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, December 20th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GettingGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And our episode today is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. Well, we have a game to talk about this weekend. The Jets will face the Los Angeles Rams this Sunday at MetLife Stadium. We also have a new Jets general manager candidate to discuss. They just interviewed a new candidate yesterday. But we have to start by talking about the top story in the New York Jets fan base. And that is the bombshell article that came out yesterday from The Athletic, which detailed dysfunction behind the scenes with the Jets, and in particular, the erratic decision-making and erratic behavior of team owner Woody Johnson. And I think a lot of the analysis on this article has kind of missed the mark. There are a lot of people questioning the motives of the writers, questioning the motives of the writers' sources in the article, and in turn questioning the validity of the article. And here's what I'll say. We don't know what the motivations are with these writers, and we don't know who their sources are. Just because, let's just say hypothetically, though, just to play devil's advocate, let's say that the writers and the sources had an axe to grind. Let's say that they were motivated to make the Jets look bad. Just having a motive doesn't necessarily mean you're saying stuff that's inaccurate. You don't have to have pure motives to be accurate. They may not have pure intentions, but that doesn't mean what they said was false. And taking it a step further, the article was so expansive. There were so many anecdotes in the article that I could totally believe that there are a couple of those stories where maybe a little context is missing. Maybe things did not happen 100% as reported. You wanted to tell me that Woody Johnson didn't actually veto a trade over Madden rankings. I could buy that. The issue, though, is that there's just so much smoke here within that article, but also in the stuff we've seen. We know that the Jets are dysfunctional behind the scenes right now. This article maybe shed a little bit of light. They gave you some specifics, but we know for a fact the Jets are dysfunctional behind the scene because all you have to do is watch the way the organization operates. And by the way, some of that article reported on stuff that's public knowledge that they can publicly prove. Other stories, the team actually confirmed. The team spokesman confirmed that a number of those incidents happened. So that's the issue with the team. It's not that the Athletic wrote an article. It's not that it told a story which is accurate. Again, like some of the specifics, maybe they're off a little bit, but the main point is that the team is very dysfunctional. And there are lots of things that are frustrating. I mean, the complete lack of professionalism this owner displays. Within that article, it talked about how he shouted an expletive at a player to tell a player he was bad. It talked about an incident in the locker room this year when the Jets Aaron Rodgers wanted to give Jeff Ulbrich a game ball after his first win. And Woody Johnson and it's Woody Johnson. It's not, I don't blame Woody Johnson's son. Woody Johnson allows his son to take the game ball and go on some, go on some tirade and give it to Garrett Wilson and post it to his social media accounts. If I ever tried to do that, my dad would never allow that. But Woody Johnson allows it. Woody Johnson's conduct is really, we've seen this over and over. These aren't the only two incidents. Woody Johnson's conduct is, I think, unbecoming of an owner. And one of the things I hear people defend Woody Johnson is he acts like a fan. Well, I'm sorry. I want my owner to act like an owner. I want my owner to act like a professional. I don't want my owner to act like a WFAN caller. I don't want my owner to act like a guy who sits in the third deck of games. I want my owner to act like a professional, not like that. But the bigger issue beyond Woody Johnson's personal conduct is the way he manages the team. And we've seen this over and over, that he interferes, he meddles in areas where he just has no knowledge. And I think one of the weakest defenses I've heard of Woody Johnson's ownership is when people say, well, if you're a GM, you get a couple of years and he only steps in when you mess up. Well, first of all, that makes it sound like Woody Johnson has like some sort of philosophy. And he doesn't. He's completely impulsive. There's no rhyme or reason to when and where he decides to impose his will on the team. That's something that's been clear for the last 24 years since he bought the team. There's no logic behind any of his moves. This is the man who told you thinking is overrated. He doesn't think. He doesn't have a philosophy. He just jumps in and interferes. And people say, well, it comes at points where the management's failed. Well, that's not really true, because Woody Johnson jumped in at this point in 2023 after the 2022 season. That was a 2022 season where maybe the Jets missed the playoffs, maybe the season ended poorly, but the Jets improved their win total by 3 games that year, and they drafted both rookies of the year. And if you listen to this show, I think I have some credibility here, because I'm no Joe Douglas apologist right now. I mean, I'm very critical of Joe Douglas, so I'm not a guy who sat here and told you Joe Douglas is the greatest GM in the history of the world. But I have no doubt the Jets were better off 2 years ago when Joe Douglas was running the team than they are right now, when Woody Johnson's taken control and run everything into the ground the last 2 years. And it's, another thing that keeps coming up is, well, look at this team that was considered dysfunctional a couple of years ago, and look how good they are now. I could over the last couple of days, I couldn't help but think about where the Philadelphia Eagles were 4 years ago. After the 2020 season, they were viewed as completely dysfunctional. They were viewed as a mess. And Howie Roseman righted the ship. Howie Roseman didn't just right the ship. Their general manager was one of the best general managers in the league. He had the Eagles in the Super Bowl within 2 years. I remember thinking a couple of days ago, if Woody Johnson was in charge then, he would have imposed as well. He would have stripped Howie Roseman of all his power. He would have made a bunch of moves, and the Eagles would never be as good right now. So I don't know how you can sit there and act like anything Woody Johnson does is rational. What good owners do is they evaluate their people. And if it isn't going well, those people either have to course correct or they get fired. What Woody Johnson does is Woody Johnson keeps bad people around and makes worse moves. The team runs worse because Woody Johnson imposes himself. He doesn't get rid of the bad people. The defenses of him are just so ridiculous. And the other thing that I've seen this a lot over the last day is people say, well, this is because the team is bad. The good teams don't have stories like this. If the Jets win, the stories will stop. And that's true to an extent, but it misses a bigger point. The behavior of Woody Johnson, which is chronicled in these articles, is a big reason the Jets don't win games. The articles are not an effect as much as they're telling you the cause of the Jets losing. The articles come out because of bad teams, but there's also reasons these teams are bad. And these articles like this shed light as to why the Jets are bad, because the Eagles may have been dysfunctional as recent as 4 years ago, but they turned it around within 2 years. About 2 years ago, the Houston Texans were one of the most dysfunctional teams in the league. They were maybe more dysfunctional than the Jets. They turned it around. The Jets are looking at a 14th straight season with no playoffs. And in those 14 years, do you know how many winning seasons they've had? They've had one. We've had head coaches change. We've had assistant coaches change. We've had front office people change. We've had support staff change. We've had players change. There has only been one constant during this tenure. That has been the ownership of Woody Johnson. So I think it's fair to say that the Jets do have a chance to turn it around. The great thing about the NFL is you can regenerate your team quickly. You can take yourself from the depths and turn it around very quickly. That's the reason for optimism. That's the case for optimism with this team, is that you're never that far away in the NFL. This is a league where quick turnarounds happen. But unless the owner grows up, unless the owner starts behaving and comporting himself in a professional way, nothing is going to change. And 3-4 years from now, we'll be back at the same point. I might be here assuming Locked On hasn't fired me. And we'll be talking about the same things. We'll be talking about the owner's behavior. We'll be talking about why this next regime failed. And if Woody Johnson plans on just imposing his will at random points, the new coach and general manager don't have a chance. This article is not about whether everything in it is 100% accurate or 100% in context. It's a reminder that this ownership has been a complete catastrophe over the last 14 years. And they are the driving force as to why the Jets are bad. And I don't see why people feel the need to defend the indefensible, because this ownership's performance has been indefensible. There's no, well, they're bad, yeah, but the Athletic shouldn't have written that article. Win games. I don't care. I'm not an Athletic fan. I'm not a fan of news sites. I'm a fan of the New York Jets. I want the New York Jets to start comporting themselves in a professional way. That's not too much to ask. It's not too much to ask for an owner to act like an adult, for an owner to act like a professional. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we actually have a game to discuss this weekend. The Los Angeles Rams are in town. It will be a frigid MetLife Stadium. I think the big question for the Jets is, can guys who haven't really shown up all year play a big game? If they do, they have a great shot of winning. We'll talk about it as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Make your holidays even bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by the College Football Playoff on TNT. It's that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, giving you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff shows presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in the showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Yes, we do have a game to discuss this weekend. Wouldn't it be great if, this December weekend we were talking about the Jets playing a big game against the Los Angeles Rams at home, and we didn't have to worry about all the tales of dysfunction behind the scenes? Well, of course, that's not the case. The Jets are 4-10. They're long out of the AFC playoff race, and they are purely playing the role of spoiler against a very hot Rams team. The Rams have won 3 straight games. Yesterday, we had Travis Rogers on our crossover Thursday show. He talked about some of the things that have been different for the Rams, including just getting some offensive line stability. And we've seen with the Jets through the years how constantly having to reshuffle your offensive line's a recipe for failure. The Rams had to do that through much of the season, and now it seems like they finally found 5 guys who can stay healthy and play together for a couple of weeks, and the results are good for the Rams. I think in many ways this is a game the Jets can win if they play up to the capabilities everybody thought they had before the start of the season. This is a Rams team that's playing very well. And when you get into the playoffs, you want to be the hot team. It's not always the best team that wins in the playoffs. It's the team that's playing the best football. And the Rams are playing very good football right now. But there are a couple of potential spoiler aspects to this game. Now, Travis had a great point yesterday, because on the crossover show, I brought up that this was a 10 a.m. start Pacific time for the Rams, which can be difficult for West Coast teams. So Travis made the point that the Rams have been very good in these games under Sean McVay. So McVay, whatever he does to get the team ready for those games, certainly it works, and they've avoided the issue that plagues a lot of West Coast teams when they come east. And we even saw that a couple of weeks ago when the Seattle Seahawks played the Jets. The Seahawks won the game, but they got off to a really slow start in that game. I wonder whether that may have been the 10 a.m. Pacific curse for a West Coast team playing on the East Coast. But the weather is not going to be nice. Please bundle up if you're going to the game on Sunday, because the wind chill is supposed to be in the teens in New Jersey. So it can be a very cold game, which you never know how that's going to impact a warm weather team. Rams are both a warm weather team and a dome team, so you don't know how that's going to impact things. And beyond that, the question is, can the Jets play a big game? This is a team that's been disappointing, but I feel like this time of year, sometimes teams that are disappointing, they randomly put it together for a week. Some team that was supposed to be good, and they've ended up being the biggest disappointment in the league. There's always some December game where they flash their promise. If the Jets do that, I think they have a shot to win this game, because this is a bad football team. Look, there's no way you can say this is a good football team, but it's not a team that's been blown out all that much. It's a team that's been sloppy in late game situations. It's a team that hasn't executed its fundamentals at a very high level. It's not a team that's well coached. It's not a team where the talent is the Super Bowl talent it was presented as before the season. But it's a team that if the pieces work, if everybody's clicking at a high level, it can do some damage. I mean, we've seen the offense over the last 2 weeks start to come to life. Now, last week was a little different. Last week, I think it was really the last 4 minutes of the game the offense came to life. I maintain this, and a lot of people seem to disagree. I felt like the first 56 minutes of the game, it was not a terribly impressive offensive showing. I really thought the last 4 minutes when Devontae Adams took over, that's when the Jets offense started to take flight, so to speak. I can't believe I used that expression. But the question is, can this Jets defense show up? And with the Jets defense, the issues are complicated. You have players who are underperforming, but you also just see a lack of fundamentals within this unit. Well, this is a game Sauce Gardner is really going to need to show up in, because Rams have an excellent receiver on the outside, Puka Nacua, who, he's the type of receiver the Sauce Gardner of 2022 and 2023 could have a lot of success against. This is a Rams offense where Cooper Kupp is not the go-to guy anymore, but Cooper Kupp remains in the slot and remains dangerous. And Michael Carter II, if he's in the lineup, that'll be a challenge for him. Michael Carter II hasn't had a big season this year. And there's also the questions that look on the defensive line. The Rams, as we heard yesterday, have kind of gotten things straightened out on the offensive line. They've been able to keep the same five together. Can this Jets defensive line show anything? And I think like the critical player for the Jets on defense is Quinnen Williams. Quinnen Williams, I don't think he's having a bad season, but this season has not been up to his standards. Or at least the standards he set in 2022 and 2023. There are weeks where he looks every bit as dominant as he did in those last two seasons. But there are weeks where, he's missing tackles. He's kind of running himself out of position. He was over pursuing plays. He's not, looking like Quinnen Williams. And I think that makes a big difference for this defense, because when Quinnen Williams is playing at a high level, it makes things easier for everyone around him. Now, unfortunately for the Jets this year, even when Quinnen Williams has played well, some of the other pieces on the defensive line have not played all that effectively. And another guy, I should give up hope on him. I shouldn't even express even the slightest amount of hope that this guy can play an effective game. But at some point, Hassan Reddick's got to have one good game, right? I mean, wouldn't this be the time for him to at least have one good game? I know this is a guy who's probably just playing out the string. I know that this is a guy who probably doesn't care all that much at this point. He's just collecting his money right now. He's waiting to hit free agency, where he hopes a big deal's waiting for him. And I'll tell you, I think his hopes are overstated, because I think off the year he's having, he's not going to get anywhere near the contract he wants. One big game's not going to help him that much. It's not going to change what a disappointment he's been for this team. It's not going to change everything that's been lost this season because of Hassan Reddick. The question, can he have one big game? Because the Hassan Reddick who was in Philadelphia was a great player. He was a guy who could take over games. And one of the stories on the defense this year has simply been that the Jets have guys who are underperforming. Quinnen Williams has not had a Quinnen Williams season. Sauce Gardner has not had a Sauce Gardner season. And Hassan Reddick certainly has not had a Hassan Reddick season. Hassan Reddick has had an invisible season. He's done nothing. Kenny, and maybe I'm just hoping against hope here. Maybe I'm just I'm just trying to talk myself into something that can't happen. But at some point, it feels like this defense has to have one good game. This is the NFL. In the NFL, everybody has one good game. Even the worst teams have one good game somewhere along the line. Maybe this could be the good game for the Jets, as they wind down the season at home against the Rams team, facing some difficult conditions. And that leads us to the final guy. We go back to the offense. Will we see the Aaron Rodgers of the last 2 weeks, the guy who's been willing to deliver the ball deep, the guy who's been willing to stand in the pocket, guy who's been able to throw on time? Or are we going to see the Aaron Rodgers of the first 12, 13 games, who really was not willing to do any of those things, who was just afraid of getting hit, who was looking to dump the ball off as quickly as he could to his outlets? These are the questions. If this Jets team, I think it's clear this Jets team was never going to the Super Bowl, but this Jets team has the ability to have one great game in them. We haven't really seen that one signature game from the Jets so far this season. We've seen some signature halves of football. The second half against Houston was an excellent half, but I don't think we've seen the Jets really put together a full 60 minutes of play all season long. Will this be the game where it happens? Again, maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into something. We'll find out. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, though, we'll look to the future. There is a new candidate who's interviewed for the Jets general manager job. Another guy with a kind of interesting resume who brings some interesting skills to the table. We'll talk about who it is and why he might be a fit as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of a Roman Empire. And, I'm going to look through, I'm going to look through Hillsdale's course selection and see if there's some management courses. Maybe we can enroll Woody Johnson in one of them. Well, all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. The Jets take on the Rams this coming Sunday. They have 3 games left in the season, and then comes the offseason. And it will be an offseason of big change in New York. The Jets will be hiring a new head coach and a new general manager. The search for the new general manager has begun. Now, the Jets, because they fired Joe Douglas early, have the ability to start speaking with general manager candidates who are not currently employed with NFL teams. So we already had 3 candidates heading into yesterday. We had former Titans general manager John Robinson, we had former Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitroff, and we had ESPN analyst Louis Riddick. We now have a 4th candidate, and that is Senior Bowl executive director Jim Nagy. And Nagy is the guy who runs the Senior Bowl, which is considered the most prestigious college all-star game. But before he cut it, he's worked in that position since 2018. He essentially runs the game. Before that, he spent close to 2 decades working as a scout in NFL front offices. So, guy with an interesting background. And what sticks out to me about Nagy is that through running the Senior Bowl, he has created a real network for himself of college coaches. And that's really important in the evaluation process. Now, every year, the prospects who come to the Senior Bowl are different. So, he can't really help you get an edge on anybody else for next year's Senior Bowl, because every year there's a new slate of prospects who come into the Senior Bowl. But when he recruits players to the game, when he finds players to come to that game, he obviously networks a lot with college coaches. And that could be a very valuable tool. And to explain this, I think back to a guy who used to be a guest on this show. There was this professional football scout, a guy who had worked in professional football as a scout for decades and decades. His name was Dave T. Thomas. He was one of the best guests we've ever had on the show. We used to bring him on around draft season, and unfortunately, Dave T. passed away a few years ago. If you ever want to go back and listen to some of the old Dave T. shows, they were always phenomenal. Everybody loved them. Whenever I talk with anybody who listened to the show, they ask me when Dave T. was coming on. But I always remember he would email me periodically, and he'd send me these scouting reports. And these were so unbelievably detailed. Dave T. actually wrote this big it's essentially an encyclopedia on every draft prospect. Gave you every piece of information you could want about every draft prospect. He did that annually. And these scouting reports he'd send me would be really interesting. And they'd have a lot about the players' backgrounds, but they'd also have things the public didn't know. A guy, there may have been a linebacker who had a bad season, but in the scouting report, Dave T. had spoken with one of the coaches, and he found out that the linebacker was playing hurt. And the linebacker knew that it would hurt his production. He knew it would hurt his draft stock, but he still played hurt because he wanted to help his team. And those are the little pieces, the little tidbits that help you determine, they kind of fill in the last pieces of information about a player. Because I actually think we're at a point where fans can probably scout film about as well as the smart fans, the smart people can actually probably scout film about as well as, the professionals. That might be a provocative statement, but I think it's true. I think the fans at the top of the game, they understand film really well. But what they don't have that pipeline to the college program to get those little pieces of information that tell you how much a guy loves football, tell you what a guy's like behind the scenes, tell you about his work ethic. And those things matter quite a a And a guy we just talked about in the last segment is a good example of that. I know it was a trade, I know it wasn't a draft pick, but Hassan Reddick's got all the talent in the world. He's shown that. We also know he doesn't have the desire to play. He's fixated on the contract. And while the Jets can't fix the Hassan Reddick trade, they can, through their scouting, through their college evaluations, figure out which guys love the game, which guys are going to work hard, which guys are going to play hurt. And I think that would be a tremendous advantage Jim Nagy would have. I think the other thing the other advantage that he has is that running the Senior Bowl That's a spot where you interact with a lot of it's pretty much a who's who of NFL executives and scouts. You get to meet everybody because they're all there because all the top prospects are at this game. And when you think about the general manager job, one of the most important aspects of that is building your team, building a quality front office around you, making sure you have great people running your personnel departments and your college scouting departments, and building an all-star team of scouts. And Jim Nagy's got experience. Jim Nagy has such a wide network. I mean, he probably has contacts at all 32 teams now because he runs the all-star game everybody goes to. And he's got the access that everybody, he's the guy that provides access to the players everybody wants to have access to. So I think that he'd be able to build a really good front office. Now, I think the questions with somebody like Jim Nagy would be, how transferable is the skill set? It's one thing to run a college all-star game. It's another thing to manage an NFL front office. There are a bunch of aspects of the game that he doesn't deal with right now. He doesn't deal with the salary cap. He doesn't deal with, I mean, I don't know the extent to which the Senior Bowl scouts using analytics, but he doesn't use analytics trying to build a team. There are lots of little things here or there. He doesn't have to deal with, he doesn't have to deal with the media. He doesn't have to deal with the Athletic writing articles about the Senior Bowl, about dysfunction behind the scenes. At least I don't think. So there are aspects that, and he's also been, he hasn't worked for a team in a number of years, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you get like a 30,000 foot view of what the other 32 teams are doing, but it's also kind of a negative because you're not around the inner workings of a team every day. Now he does have a lot of experience as a scout, so maybe that could be a mitigating factor. But I think he's an interesting candidate. I think one thing to note though is this search is probably going to go on for a while. The Jets can't begin speaking with, unless they get permission, the Jets cannot begin speaking with candidates who are currently employed by other teams until the regular season ends. And that's still 3 weeks away. So I think that this is going to be a longer search. I think right now the Jets are interviewing a lot of candidates who are viewed as outside the box candidates. And that's not a coincidence. The reason they're interviewing outside the box candidates right now is they can't speak with anybody who's employed by a team. But I think they're interviewing the right outside the box candidates. I think all the candidates are people I probably would have had on my list of people the Jets should at least speak to before this search began. So again, it's a very fluid situation. I mean, I don't want to make any sweeping generalizations about this search, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the direction it's going in, even if I'm not cautiously optimistic about this team's ownership and the way it will handle the new people once they're in place. That's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll be back after the game to break down what happened between the Jets and the Rams.